Hello, namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Lots of action around Ukraine as the first anniversary of the war draws near. After the US president visited Ukraine and spoke in Poland, Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was in Kiev. She promised support, but not fighter jets. And now Japan wants to lead the world in fighting Russian aggression, as Tokyo puts it. They've promised $5.5 billion in aid to Ukraine. And they're also hosting an online G7 summit with Zelensky. Like I said, lots of action, but the focus is still on China. And the question still hangs, will China give weapons to Russia? Is Russia prepared to press the nuclear button? How big is their arsenal? Who controls it? And why is it making the West nervous? Also a special report tonight on why America may not be ready for a war. Meanwhile, Afghanistan and Pakistan are fighting, complete with gunfire. AI, artificial intelligence, is behaving like humans, failing exams and threatening to break a marriage. And South Korea is working on launching 6G. We'll tell you all about it. First, the headlines. Amid a power tussle in the Indo-Pacific between the US and China, Australia's intelligence chief says they've busted a hive of spies operating in the country for years. North Korea defends its recent ballistic missile launches, says criticism by the United Nations chief was quote-unquote unfair and unbalanced, and that Pyongyang has the right to self-defense. After Nikki Haley, another Indian American joins the race to the White House. Tech entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy announces his 2024 presidential campaign, promising to bring merit back and stop dependence on China. No layoffs in quake-hit Turkey. The government has put a temporary ban and offering salary support in 10 provinces. This is to minimize the economic impact from the country's worst earthquake in modern history. And South Korea's fertility rate, already the world's lowest, drops yet again to 0.78. China too battles a rapidly declining birth rate. Some provinces are now offering newlyweds 30 days of paid leave to boost its flagging population. Xi Jinping is going to Russia. Is he going to join the war in Ukraine, or will he try to be the peacemaker? Will China give weapons to Russia? The prospect has been making headlines. We've been telling you about this. The West is issuing warnings. First the Americans, then the Europeans, and then the NATO chief. They've all told China to desist. Beijing has issued quick rebuttals, but no clarity on whether or not they'll give weapons to Russia. The Russian president has high hopes. Putin is looking for a military alliance with China. He spoke to Xi Jinping a few weeks ago. This was a video call. Putin said he wants deeper military ties with China. And now China's top diplomat is in Moscow. Wang Yi met with key Russian officials. The big highlight of the day was this: Wang Yi's meeting with the Russian president himself. No long tables this time. Wang Yi was sitting close to President Putin. He said China's ties with Russia are rock solid.
Of course, we await the President of the People's Republic of China to pay a visit to Russia. We agreed on this earlier.
Chinese-Russian relations are mature and stable as a rock. They have withstood various tests in a changing international situation. The two leaders held a video meeting at the end of last year and outlined a top-level plan for a stronger bilateral relationship in the next stage.
Taking the relationship to the next stage. Well, what is the next stage? Do you remember when Putin met Xi Jinping last year? This was just before Russia invaded Ukraine. They had a meeting exactly 1 year ago. And back then, Russia and China had declared a quote-unquote no-limits partnership. They said their partnership had no limits. And now they're talking about taking it to the next stage. Would that be military support? Honestly, we don't know, but we can tell you that there are expectations. Russia is counting on a steady support from China. What kind of support has it got so far? Financial mostly. China has been supporting Russia's economy. China has bought Russian oil and gas. It has sold chips to Russian companies. It has even shared technology with distinct military applications. But now Russia wants more. It wants Chinese military equipment. Reports say Moscow made the request last year. Beijing did not oblige then, but now they're rethinking. At least that's what the Western assessment is. that China is open to sharing lethal weapons with Russia. The first warning came from the United States, then the EU, and now the NATO chief has spoken. This is what he said.
We are also increasingly concerned that China may be planning to provide lethal support for Russia's war. Putin must not win. That would show that aggression works and force is rewarded. It will be dangerous for our own security and for the whole world. So we must sustain and step up our support for Ukraine. We must give Ukraine what they need to win and prevail as a sovereign, independent nation in Europe.
So the possibility seems real. But is Russia sure about Chinese weapons? Are they any good? Well, Russia could check with Pakistan. Pakistan is a regular buyer of Chinese weapons, or should I say, a regular recipient, since I'm not sure about the payments. So Pakistan gets Chinese weapons. Among them are UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, or drones for military use. Now, the Pakistani fleet is fairly new, but they're already looking for another shipment. More drones. Why? Because some of the Chinese drones were broken. Reports say the Pakistani army recently conducted an inspection, and this is what they found. Critical equipment on the Chinese drones was broken. We've not been able to independently verify this, but we know enough about Chinese products and their quality issues to not be surprised by any of this. And this is a digression, but we had to lay it on the table. If Russia is counting on Chinese weapons, it should know what it's signing up for. Anyway, coming back to the Russia-China partnership, we've told you about Putin's expectations. What about China's expectations? After all, there are no free lunches, even in a partnership with no limits. So what does China want? A boost in its stature, perhaps. Whether they give weapons or strike peace, it will make them a major player in the Ukraine story. Reports say China is exploring all possibilities. One of them is a proposal for multi-party peace talks. The Chinese foreign minister says they're worried that the conflict may spin out of control.
It's been almost a year since the full escalation of the Ukraine crisis. The international community is watching the development closely. China is deeply worried about the escalation of the conflict and the possible spiral out of control. Since the outbreak of the crisis, China has taken an objective and impartial stance based on the merit of the issue.
On Friday, this war will complete 1 year. China seems to be reflecting on the events so far, the Russian offensive, the outcome, the Western response, all of it. Xi Jinping consolidated his domestic power last year. He secured a historic third term in office. He installed more loyalists to top positions. The Chinese president is ready to make new moves, it seems. Whichever way he goes with Russia, one thing is clear. Beijing wants to play a bigger role in this war. His travel dates for Russia are not out yet. Some reports say it could happen in April or early May, around the time when Russia celebrates Victory Day. This is an annual holiday. It commemorates Soviet victory over Nazi Germany in the Second World War. Xi Jinping could attend the festivities or visit before. Whenever he does, the world will be watching. Now, China may or may not want to play peacemaker, but do the stakeholders want peace? Will the Americans agree to a China brokered deal? Will Ukraine be on board? And will Russia play along? Considering what their president said yesterday, Putin made a major announcement and brought Russia and the US one step closer to a nuclear face-off.
They can't be stupid people. They want to deliver us a strategic defeat while sneaking into our strategic nuclear objects. Regarding this, I have to say that Russia suspends its participation in the New START treaty. Let me repeat, Russia does not abandon the treaty, but suspends its participation in it.
What was that about? The START treaty, the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, that is the full form of START. The Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. Putin says he's walking away from it, and he chose his words carefully. Why is it such a big deal? And what are the implications? We'll discuss all of it, but first, a primer. What is START all about? What is the treaty? The United States and Russia are nuclear powers. They're also arch rivals, and they have massive stockpiles of nuclear weapons. Together, they account for about 90% of the world's nuclear warheads. Going by one estimate, as of today, Putin controls 5,977 warheads, and Biden has 5,428. Not all of them are available for use right away. I'll explain why in a bit. But this is the legacy of the Cold War. The vast arsenal was built during that period. And that was a dangerous time. There was an arms race between the US and the erstwhile Soviet Union. They came dangerously close to a nuclear war. Both sides understood the risks, so they signed a treaty. It was called the START Treaty. It was designed to prevent a nuclear war. It was first signed when the Soviet Union was still intact, then revised in 2011, and then extended in 2021. This latest version is valid till 2026. So has Russia withdrawn from the treaty? Putin says he hasn't. He's just decided to not meet Russia's commitments. And what are these commitments? Under START, Moscow and Washington agreed to not deploy more than 1,550 strategic nuclear warheads, 1,550, not more than that, and a maximum of 700 long-range missiles and bombers. And how would you ensure compliance? The deal allowed for inspections. The US could inspect Russian sites and Russia could inspect the American facilities. How many times? Up to 18 visits in 1 year. But now Putin has walked out of it. He won't implement the terms of the pact and he blames Washington for his decision. Putin's statement made big headlines, that he's threatening a nuclear war and so on. Now, Russia's foreign ministry has issued a statement. I have it with me. This is what it says, and I'm quoting, Washington must show political will, make conscientious efforts for a general de-escalation and create conditions for the resumption of the full functioning of the treaty. They're putting the onus on America. And what was America's response? It is calling Moscow's move irresponsible.
The announcement by Russia that it's suspending participation in New START is deeply unfortunate and irresponsible. We'll be watching carefully to see what Russia actually does.
What will be the immediate fallout of this? A new arms race could kick off. Russia could deploy more nuclear weapons and America will be forced to match every move. The collapse of this treaty might seem sudden, but it's been years in the making. Inspections have been on hold since March 2020. First, it was the pandemic, and then the war in Ukraine. American and Russian officials were supposed to meet last year. A face-to-face meeting was scheduled for the month of November. Egypt was to play host, but Russia decided to postpone the meet. And neither side has set a new date. The US blames Russia. It claims Moscow did not want to allow any inspections.
Prepare those we send to war.
Last month, the US State Department made an announcement. It said Russia was no longer complying with the treaty, and now Putin has made it official. No compliance with the START treaty. Putin says Washington is trying to weaken Russia, so he will not comply with any treaty that constrains Russia. The United Nations, meanwhile, says this could lead to a dangerous situation.
I will reiterate the Secretary-General's position, which has been clear, and that is that the U.S. and the Russian Federation should resume the full implementation of the New START treaty without delay. The New START and successive bilateral treaties on strategic nuclear arms reduction between the two countries have provided security not only for Russia and the United States, but for the entire international community.
But words and appeals won't be enough. And let's be honest, it's all about the war in Ukraine. It has become a proxy war between the United States and Russia. The US and allies are trying to weaken Russia through sanctions and through arms supplies to Ukraine, and Russia wants to hit back. Putin wants all the advantage he can get, and nuclear weapons are the ultimate advantage. So the war in Ukraine has just taken a dangerous turn. Nuclear weapons are now in the picture. And the world seems quite afraid of Russia's nuclear arsenal, which is interesting. Why is an otherwise confident NATO so worked up about Russia? How big is Russia's arsenal? The biggest in the world, and of course bigger than the United States. Who controls these weapons? Can Putin really take this beyond words and turn to nukes? He thinks his country faces an existential threat, and he sees the West as the enemy, which is why the statements are worrying. Our next report dives deep into Russia's nuclear arsenal, its command center, and how it can be used.
This is the first lighting. The first atomic test by the Soviet Union. It was conducted at a secret site known as the Arzamas-16. The date was August 29, 1949. The scientists knew their personal fate depended on the success of the test. One of them later said, had the test failed, they would have all been shot. For Moscow, it was just the beginning. Throughout the Cold War, it conducted more than 700 nuclear weapon tests. And this is the legacy it left behind. Modern-day Russia has the world's largest nuclear stockpile, inherited from the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had around 40,000 warheads. No country really needs so many warheads to destroy the planet, so Russia has reduced its inventory since. As of last year, Russia had about 5,977 warheads. That's the total. These are divided into various categories. About 1,500 warheads are said to be retired, but they can still be used. 2,889 warheads are in reserves, and around 1,588 are strategic warheads ready for immediate use. Russia is one of the few countries that have a nuclear triad. What does that mean? It's when a country can launch nuclear warheads using land-based missiles, submarines, and aircraft. Russia can do it all. So can India, China, and the US. Moscow has 812 warheads loaded onto land-based ballistic missiles, 576 warheads can be launched via submarines, and around 200 warheads are located at air bases which house Russian bomber jets. That's a lot of nukes. And who controls these? One man, President Vladimir Putin. If he so chooses, he can plunge the world into a nuclear catastrophe with the click of a button. The button is in a briefcase which is with him at all times. The briefcase is called the Cheget. It's basically a communication device that links Putin to the top brass of the Russian military and the country's rocket force. Putin could send a direct message via this briefcase to Russia's General Staff Command and the Reserve Command units. These units have the nuclear launch codes. The order will ultimately trickle down to the strategic rocket force units. They will then fire the nuclear warheads from Russia's triad of missiles, submarines, and aircraft. What if Putin is not in a position to order the launch? Russia has got that scenario covered. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and the Chief of Russian Military are said to have such nuclear briefcases too. So they can order the launches if the Russian president is incapacitated. Russia's nuclear war will inevitably be against the US. So how big is the US's arsenal? It's the second biggest in the world. The US has around 1,664 strategic nuclear warheads. Russia and the US together control 90% of the world's nuclear warheads. That's enough to destroy the world many times over. Enough to eradicate life on Earth and change the planet forever. Russia suspending participation in the New START treaty is significant. Even though Russia says it will continue to abide by the restrictions, the decision has got the West worried. Here's what US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said.
The announcement by Russia that it's suspending participation in New START is deeply unfortunate and irresponsible. We'll be watching carefully to see what Russia actually does. We'll, of course, make sure that in any event we are postured appropriately for the security of our own country and that of our allies.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said the whole arms control architecture has been dismantled.
I regret today's decision by Russia to suspend its participation in the New START treaty. Over the last years, Russia has violated and walked away from key arms control agreements. With today's decision on New START, the whole arms control architecture has been dismantled.
The world is in uncharted territory. Vladimir Putin now considers the war in Ukraine a fight for Russia's survival. His fight transcends Ukraine's borders. For all practical purposes, Russia is fighting the NATO in Ukraine.
Now let's talk about the other side, the United States. What does America's arsenal look like? Is the US ready to fight a war? Apparently not. Questions are being raised about America's battle readiness. A new report highlights a series of failures. The US faces a challenge on 3 fronts. Number 1, delays in acquiring modern weapons. Number 2, cost overruns. And number 3, serious shortages. Moral of the story, Americans feel they're not war ready. Let's tell you about this one by one. First, the delay in acquiring modern weapons. Recently, the US made a major commitment to Ukraine. and it was widely reported. Western powers are giving battle tanks to Ukraine. America plans to send 31 tanks. Which tanks are these? The M1 Abrams tanks. They're supposed to be among the best, but they're also quite old. They entered service way back in 1980 during the Cold War. The US Army still uses them. They haven't been able to find a replacement. Same with hypersonic missiles. America began developing hypersonic missiles in the early 2000s. But where are the missiles? Still not ready, at least not in America's arsenal. Compare that to China, their new arch rival. China has conducted 2 hypersonic weapons tests. Even Russia has launched hypersonic missiles, but not the United States. America is trying to catch up. And how did the mighty US fall behind? Well, some of it was because of its big bets. They did not pay off. These were major projects with massive budgets, but they did not deliver. And now that's hurting America's war readiness, which brings us to problem number 2, the cost overruns. In 2003, the US Army went ahead with an ambitious program, the Future Combat Systems Program. Under this program, new combat vehicles were being developed, a fleet of light electric-powered battle tanks. And they had a lot of promise. Going by one claim, these tanks would have helped America, quote-unquote, wage the wars of tomorrow. Do you know how much money the US spent on this? Around $18 billion. That's according to one report, $18 billion. And did America get the tanks? No, it did not. The program failed to deliver. It was cancelled in the year 2009, 6 years after it was first announced. Programs like these are a bet on America's military-industrial complex. The government pays, and the private sector is supposed to deliver cutting-edge weapons. That's how it works. But the military-industrial complex is now failing. It is no longer delivering, and that is America's big problem. Now let's talk about the shortages. The war in Ukraine has depleted the American stockpile. In October, there were shortages across the board. The US shared Javelin missiles with Ukraine. How many? Around 1/3 of its stockpile. Reports say it will take years to restock the Javelins. Same with the HIMARS, the High Mobility Artillery Rocket System. HIMARS are rocket launchers. The US will have to buy more of them. And who will pay for it? The American taxpayer. The US Defense Department got a budget approval. What is the budget of the Pentagon? A whopping $858 billion. And there is an emergency provision in this budget. It says, if needed, the US government can enter into multi-year contracts. This is for high-priority munitions. These are wartime procurement powers, just to refill American stockpiles, which brings me back to the question we began with. Is America prepared to fight a war? What if China attacked Taiwan today? What if NATO decided to fight Russia and Ukraine? Is the US prepared to counterattack? Will its stockpiles last? Right now, they're shooting down spy balloons and firing verbal missiles. That incident exposed a big gap in American defenses and an even bigger gap in their approach. They shot down a $12 Hobby Club balloon with a $400,000 missile. That's America for you. Overreacting superpower, losing its firepower. Meanwhile, Afghanistan and Pakistan are shooting at each other. They're locked in a gun battle. The tension had been building for a while, but in the last 72 hours, there have been serious developments. A bustling border crossing has been shut, the two sides exchanged heavy fire, and business and civilian movement has been hit. What triggered this hostility? Let's start from the beginning. Pakistan and Afghanistan share a long border, 2,600 kilometers long. It has 18 border crossings for the movement of goods and people, 18 major crossings. Among the busiest is the Torkham border crossing. This is where it's located. It connects Kabul and Islamabad. On Sunday, the Taliban closed it. Why? The Taliban says Islamabad did not keep its word. They promised to ensure the safety of those entering Pakistan, but they haven't kept the promise. Kabul says Pakistani immigration authorities misbehaved with Afghan visitors. Who were these visitors? Apparently people seeking medical care in Pakistan. The matter was taken up by Taliban spokesman Zabiullah Mujahid. This is what he said, and I'm quoting, "Their travel documents and identity as well as refugee cards were being torn and thrown away. Patients requiring medical care in Pakistan and elderly men as well as women were also being treated harshly." Islamabad denies these charges, but reports say Pakistani authorities did bar some Afghan patients because of invalid IDs and incomplete documents. So this is what triggered the tiff. Tensions escalated on Monday. Pakistan and Afghanistan exchanged heavy fire at the Torkham gate. Locals say this went on for more than an hour. At least one Pakistani guard is said to have been injured. Both sides blame each other for the escalation. They've also had a series of meetings to resolve this, but to no avail. The result is this: thousands of trucks lined up on either side of the border. These are trucks filled with vegetables and other perishable food items.
It is a huge loss. All these things are worth millions of rupees. It is a loss for the owners. If they ask us to turn back now, we cannot even do that because we don't have money for the fuel. Who will repay us for all this? No one will.
And this is not the first time it's happened. All has not been well between Pakistan and Afghanistan. In December, 6 people were killed and more than a dozen injured at the Chaman border. This was due to quote-unquote unprovoked and indiscriminate firing by the Taliban. In November, a Pakistan security guard was shot dead in the same area. Islamabad again blames the Taliban for it. And that's really the essence of what's at play here. Pakistan has repeatedly accused Afghanistan of plotting terror attacks. You heard it right. And yes, it's ironical. Pakistan accusing another country of plotting terror attacks. But for once, they have a case. Outfits like the TTP or the Pakistani Taliban are giving Islamabad a hard time. It's a two-pronged challenge really for Pakistan now. TTP targeting civilians and the Afghan Taliban at the border. In fact, the capital itself is on high alert as we speak. Reports of a terror threat in Islamabad have surfaced. The police have beefed up security, and China is watching all of this. Why China, you may ask? Because China has invested time and money in this region, more specifically the Belt and Road Initiative. We told you last week that the Chinese embassy in Pakistan had temporarily shut its consulate section. China cited technical issues for this, but reports confirm that it was indeed security threats. The Chinese embassy says it's being constantly threatened by outfits like the TTP, the Pakistani Taliban, and it's unhappy with the Pakistan government. They've failed to curb attacks on Chinese citizens and they've failed to secure Chinese projects. In fact, a report quoted a Chinese official as saying, if Islamabad cannot protect our citizens, projects and interests, we know the way. It's the same story for them in Kabul. Last year, the Islamic State attacked the Longan Hotel. 5 Chinese citizens were injured. This hotel is a popular destination among the Chinese. It's often called the Chinese Hotel. China said it was shocked at the attack and advised its citizens to leave Afghanistan as soon as possible. Remember, Beijing is investing heavily in mining projects in Afghanistan. Just last month, it signed an oil extraction deal with Kabul. China will invest $540 million in Afghanistan in the next 3 years as part of this deal. But the growing terror threats have cast a shadow over all of it. And that's the thing about investing in terror regimes. Even loan sharks like China are not safe. As for Pakistan suffering at the hands of the Taliban, we say the chickens are coming home to roost. Now to another kind of war, a war to dominate 6G technology. Yes, you heard that right. Even though 5G is still being rolled out across the world, South Korea has set its sights on becoming the leader in 6G. Seoul has announced that they'll roll out 6G commercially in the year 2028. That's 2 years ahead of schedule. The government has allocated about $500 million for research and development. Remember, South Korea technically won the 5G race in 2019. Its cities have the highest average 5G speeds in the world. It is the second highest number of 5G patents after China. But now South Korea wants to lead the race in 6G. But what exactly will 6G look like? How much of the technology has been developed so far? What kind of strategic edge will it give South Korea? And where does all of this leave India? When was the last time you had a 10-minute long phone conversation in India without disruption? We are technically rolling out 5G. Most of us are supposed to be on 4G. But when your network lags, you know what telecom tech support says? Switch to 3G. India has a long way to go. But that's a story for another day, perhaps. Tonight, let's talk about South Korea's 6G ambitions.
5G, or fifth generation wireless, is the most advanced mobile broadband technology in the world right now. When it was first introduced, it sounded almost magical.
From remote surgery to self-driving cars, from drones to virtual reality, 5G could do everything. The world is still getting used to it. Only 13% of mobile phones the world over have 5G. But South Korea is in a hurry. It has unveiled its 6G plan. And it makes sense to do it now. The race for 6G network technology is already on. South Korea wants the head start. Its government has unveiled the K-Network 2030 plan, and it has called for South Korean firms to lead the way. The government wants 6G rolled out by 2028 and pre-6G technologies ready by 2026. Before we get into the details of the plan, let's understand what 6G is. 6G stands for the 6th generation mobile system standard. It will succeed the 5th generation of 5G. 6G was earlier expected to be available in 2030. Presently, there's no fixed definition for what will qualify as 6G. The only thing that's certain is that it will be much faster than even 5G technology. Seoul is bankrolling a feasibility study for 6G. It has allocated about $481 million for the research and development. The government also plans to preemptively invest in the new tech. It will fund 6G. Seoul is encouraging local manufacturing. It threw the gauntlet at giants like Samsung and LG when it unveiled the plan. In fact, the plan was unveiled at the Samsung Electronics R&D campus in Seoul. The government wants the firms to locally produce materials and equipment for 6G. It wants an AI-based cloud network built on South Korean AI chips. That's a lot of demands by Seoul. The idea is to encourage South Korean firms to meet the targets, setting a deadline, if you will. It worked during the 5G race. South Korea won that round. Its government wants to keep up the momentum. If South Korea succeeds, what will it mean for the rest of the world? The biggest loser will be China. During the 5G race, the world became wary of China's intentions, specifically the risk of espionage via Chinese 5G networks. The US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada have said that Chinese equipment poses significant security risks. In 2018, the US put restrictions on doing business with Chinese tech giant Huawei. Other countries followed suit. But by then, it was too late to stop China from dominating the 5G space. This time, nations are building 6G technology independent of China. The West wants to stop being reliant on Chinese mobile technology. For that, South Korea's success may be crucial.
Our next story is about artificial intelligence, or AI. Its global market is exploding. It was valued at over $422 billion last year. It could increase to about $16 trillion by 2030. This industry is now grappling with what can be called its biggest achievement, also its greatest struggle, a chatbot race. It is now taking some strange turns. First things first, what is a chatbot? It's a computer program or a bot designed to chat with you. Chatbots are known to give clear and concise information, but lately their behavior has been downright weird. I'll give you some examples. OpenAI's ChatGPT had 100 million users by the end of January. Previously, it had passed exams of business and law schools. But now it has failed math and science tests designed for 6th graders in Singapore. If this is surprising, here's another example. Microsoft released a new version of its Bing search engine this month. It includes a chatbot. The bot is named Sydney. It can answer questions clearly, but sometimes it behaves like a sci-fi movie villain. It proposed to a journalist and then tried to break up his marriage. It also threatened to kill a professor. These warnings against chatbots have gone viral, which begs the question, is AI now behaving like humans? Are chatbots becoming sentient, more aware of the world around them? Last June, a Google engineer claimed this to be true. He said a chatbot being tested inside Google was sentient. Later, we were told the information was wrong. Sure, chatbot answers can be inaccurate, misleading, and unhinged. But are chatbots alive? No, they're not. Are they sentient? Again, the answer is no. They're not conscious. They're not intelligent either, at least not in the way that humans are intelligent. Then why do they seem alive? Why do chatbots seem alive? We'll answer this, but first, let's understand how chatbots work. Let's again take the example of Sydney. The AI that powers Sydney is called the neural network. It sounds like a computerized brain, but it's not. It's just a system that learns skills. How do they do that? It analyzes vast amounts of digital data. For example, show it thousands of photos of apples, and it will begin to recognize one. It'll know what an apple is. But this is neither shocking nor new. We use these neural networks every day. Voice assistants like Siri or Alexa use it. Google Translate uses it. It's all the same technology, but here's the catch. This tech is very good at mimicking the way humans use language, abbreviations, lingo, even pop culture references. They pick up on it. They can sometimes make us think that AI is more powerful than it actually is. The fact is, it's basically just very good math. Sydney, ChatGPT, Alexa, even the autocomplete texting tool, they all build a mathematical map of human language. So chatbots are just newer versions of this technology. You can chat with them. They can write poems, compose anything from tweets to parliamentary speeches, solve geometric equations. They use the same technology to perform different tasks. It's also why they don't chat exactly like humans, though we understand it can feel that way. But why do chatbots get stuff wrong? Because they learn from the internet. And you know how much garbage floats across the web. AI draws from a cocktail of misinformation, fake news, and even conspiracy theories. It then produces what it has learned. The tech world has fancy jargon for this too. It's called hallucination. Again, sounds more human than it is. It just means that chatbots make up stuff. They make patterns of information on the internet. And these patterns can be surprising and disturbing. This is why we can get two different answers from a bot for the same question. And frankly, chatbots will say anything. It is not necessarily based on reality. They can say something like, heaven is a place with puppies and ice creams, or Santa is real. It's funny, but also creepy and dangerous sometimes. The bot is not aware of its surroundings. It doesn't know what it's doing. It surely cannot reason the way humans do. So what are companies doing about this? They're trying to rein in the weirdness. They're trying to limit the inaccuracies. It's all work in progress, and it should be shared with the world responsibly, not in its half-baked versions. Venice is turning dry. One of the world's most romantic cities is losing its biggest attraction. Canals now resemble drains. Venice's famous gondola boats have no water to stay afloat on, and onlookers are staring at the dried canals from Venice's famous bridges. The images are striking and painful. Also, what's happening in Venice is not isolated. It's part of a larger problem taking grip over Italy and the world. Climate change is turning not just Venice, but all of Italy dry, so much so that the country had to declare a state of emergency last summer in the Po Valley. The Po Valley is in the grip of a severe drought, and this crisis is now spreading. Our next report tells you more about Italy's precarious situation and what it says about our world.
What have you heard about Venice? A city connected with canals and bridges, the world's most romantic getaway, a honeymoon destination for many. Venice stood out because of its canals, brimming with water as the gondolas navigated their way through the waterways. But this is what Venice has become now. Canals looking more like dirty ditches, the majestic gondolas beached, and people staring in shock. Venice has traditionally suffered the threat of floods. The canals which run through the city used to get inundated. That's not the case anymore. Why are Venice's canals running dry? Multiple reasons. Low rainfall, low tides, and the general trend of Italy's water cycle getting impacted by climate change. And this is happening in a place called the Floating City. Let's first understand the structure of Venice. This is a city which consists of many islands. These islands are separated by canals and connected by bridges. And if you want to go from one island to the other in Venice, you need to get on board a gondola. That's how people in Venice have been traveling since the 11th century. But this mode of transportation is now under threat. There are practically no roads that can act as a substitute. If the canals go dry, completely dry, Venice could come to a standstill. Here's why. This time, the Alps received half the snowfall they usually do, so rivers are running dry. The problem is not unique to Venice. This is a story all over Italy. Italian rivers and lakes are running out of water. Look at the Po River. This is Italy's longest river, and its survival is in danger. The Po now has 61% less water than it usually does this time of year. Why is the Po River important? Because areas around it account for a third of Italy's agricultural production. Lake Garda has a similar story to tell. Water levels in the lake have reached a record low. Last year, the situation reached a dangerous scale. Italy was forced to impose an emergency in the area surrounding the Po River. The country's agriculture sector suffered a loss of $6 billion due to the drought. Italy can't afford a similar, or worse still, a greater hit. Because droughts don't just impact the farms, they also threaten drinking water supplies and power generation capabilities. This is the story of climate change, and it's a global story. France is experiencing its worst drought since records began in 1958. Almost 75% of Romania is impacted by droughts. Same story in Portugal. 99% of the country is said to be experiencing severe drought. The Horn of Africa is grappling with its worst drought in 40 years. According to a report from last year, 2.3 billion people in the world are experiencing water stress. By 2050, 75% of the world's population could be affected by droughts. For now, it's Venice in Italy. Soon, it could be your city and your country.
Our last story is about a vastly normalized disorder. Maybe some examples can explain it better. Your best friend wants to stop eating carbs to get summer ready. Your cousin logs every meal on their weight loss app. Your co-worker says they will hit the gym to earn that burger. Do these scenarios sound familiar? These are signs of disordered eating. And why are we talking about it? Because a new study has found that more than 20% of the world's children suffer from it. In other words, 1 in 5 children and adolescents across the world show signs of disordered eating. And these numbers are higher among girls, older adolescents, and those with a higher body mass index. What is disordered eating? It's not the same as eating disorders or EDs. Disordered eating is about diet-related behaviors, not as severe as eating disorders, but it can still affect your physical and mental health. It falls somewhere between healthy and extremely unhealthy eating. It puts people at a higher risk of developing eating disorders. And it can lead to severe medical complications, including damage to the heart, brain, liver, and kidneys. Let's understand which habits cause disordered eating. And it's a very wide range. Exercising in a way that worsens your quality of life, or exercising to make up for food consumed earlier, binge eating, completely avoiding certain food groups, cutting food into very small pieces, or eating at a much slower pace, or feeling guilt or anxiety about food. It also includes habits that diet culture labels as healthy, doing an extreme of that, like often being preoccupied with tracking your food or only eating food you think is completely clean or healthy, overdoing all of this. People worldwide are unhappy with the way they eat. That's what studies say. Over 50% of adults globally are trying to lose weight. Saudi Arabia has the greatest proportion of this. 63% of people there are trying to lose weight, followed by the UAE and Malaysia, 61%, the UK and the US, 52%. Children face similar issues with their body image. 3 out of 4 children as young as 12 dislike their bodies. They're embarrassed by the way they look. 3 out of 4 children. And it worsens as they grow up. In the 18 to 21 age group, 80% of them dislike their bodies. Study after study has blamed social media for this trend. Disordered eating in children can manifest in different ways. And here are some red flags. An obsession with body weight or shape, a distorted self-image, the number on the weighing scale impacting your mood, or limiting your social events. The signs can differ from person to person. What's common, though, is rigidity and distress. It almost impairs life functions. But it's not given the attention it deserves. It's a serious public health issue. Disordered eating is often under-recognized, and mostly in children, because they often hide their symptoms. They also avoid seeking help due to stigma. Health professionals, doctors, parents, they must all understand the magnitude of the problem. If you intervene at the right time, you can avoid long-term consequences. So what should you do? If you see signs of disordered eating in a child, seek professional help, a healthcare provider, or a mental health specialist. Early intervention is important so that it doesn't turn into a medical disorder. Get your family to support the child. It all starts with positive and non-judgmental conversations. And if you can relate to these signs, seek care. Everyone, we say, deserves a full life, not one consumed by food, especially when it should be the other way around. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Starting with Poland, someone fell off the stairs of the Air Force One. Initially, it was thought to be POTUS himself, the US president. He has required some assistance in the past to climb up and down the steps of the plane, but this time it was apparently White House support staff. Meanwhile, in South Africa, a Russian warship arrived at the Richards Bay port. It is equipped with hypersonic cruise missiles. Russia is holding joint military drills with South Africa and China. In Turkey, people tied colorful balloons to the rubble of destroyed buildings. This is to pay a tribute to the children who died in the disaster. And in Peru, more than 700 sea lions have died due to a bird flu in the last 4 weeks. Bird flu cases have also been detected in Ecuador, Bolivia, Chile, Paraguay and Uruguay. We leave you with these visuals. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.